Mark,
Yes.
don't you think that autumn is synonymous with changes?
Yes. The leaves.
We're all going through changes. It's
We're all
autumn,
going through
everyone's
changes.
changing. Fall
Fall.
for our international
For the international audience, yeah.
And also fall and autumn, they're about the feels.
They are about the feels.
So this week we're going to talk about the feels, and we're going to talk about changes, specifically the song changes. Aha, you might say.
Yeah.
The Black Sabbath song.
The Black Sabbath song.
Well, yeah, technically. But the Black Sabbath song done by quite an extraordinary man called Charles Bradley, a soul singer who's no longer with us. But this isn't a man who shot to fame in the 60s. This is a man who hit his fame well into the 2010s and then soon after passed away. And I think it's a fascinating story. And I think maybe in keeping with the autumn theme as well, he was in the autumn years of his life before he even started to make his mark. And I think that really underscores some of the poignancy of this episode. So let's get introspective and look at some changes.
So, welcome to Unsung Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
We are the Unsung Podcast.
Well,
My name's Mark.
I'm still Chris.
He's still Chris.
That has not changed.
And yeah, as you said, this week we would talk a little bit about the life of Charles Bradley and some interesting covers as well.
Yeah. So this is effectively an unsung, okay? Because this act was brought to my attention largely due to his cover of Changes by Black Sabbath. But there's so much more to him other than that. The Screaming Eagle of Soul.
Screaming Eagle of Soul.
Yeah. So Changes is a song. It's also the title of a Charles Bradley album, his third album, which was released in a subsidiary of Daptone Records, which is based in Brooklyn in New York City. The single originally came out in 2013. You may have heard it. I mean, when I first got into this song, I started sending it to people, and the likes of Craig, who's a man who likes his soul, he was like, I've been listening to this guy for ages. I was like, wow, okay, I'm amazed that I didn't hear. But I overheard it in a cafe one day, and then I heard it in another place, and I was like, oh man, that's that song again. That's really good. I need to find out who it was. And this is who it is. And his story is fascinating to me, actually. Fascinating. Some basics of Charles Bradley. Born in 1948 in Brooklyn, and he passed away in 2017 from stomach cancer. He spent over 40 years trying to make a living in music whilst barely surviving, really. In his 50s, he finally started to get some traction. He'd spent some time performing as Charles Bradley and the Sugarman 3. I don't know if that's a reference to Sugarman, searching for Sugarman, the whole kind of like South African thing. But he had to wait until his 60s to get properly noticed and to get some actual real acclaim. There are many comparisons to various singers of the past, like Otis Redding, but specifically James Brown. There's a reason for that. There's a great documentary that will draw quite heavily on. It's a low budget documentary. It's called Charles Bradley Soul of America. You can get it on YouTube, certainly. I would encourage you to go and have a wee watch of it. Probably other places as well. It debuted at South by Southwest in 2012, which was the year after the album it depicts was released. So it's kind of the story. I think it picks up about 50 days prior to his album release, and he's sort of getting ready for it and telling you about himself and doing little bits and bobs, including like flyering in the street for his debut show of this album. But that documentary is a really fascinating insight into this guy, and it actually changed my approach to this episode, because on one hand I'm like, oh, it's an interesting story of a guy in the later years of his life finding success just shortly before he passed away, really. But the documentary, there was an emergent theme in that to do with his mum and how it changes the way I feel about this song. Like to be frank, there's an added layer of sadness and melancholy because autumn is a time of fall feels. And so I really want to kind of like hone in on that a little bit. I will say, great documentary. Lots of bits where it really tugs at the heartstrings. I think there was one scene in particular where he's in, is it pronounced Poughkeepsie? The town of Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie.
And he meets two of his friends in that town. He'd spent time there when he was younger. And he's obviously so moved by meeting them. And there's just this moment where he thanks them from the stage and starts singing the line, "I love you." And honestly, it's such a profound impact just watching him do that. I mean, part of that is because of the guy's voice, because it's sensational, like really sensational. But also just the rawness of the film combined with the simplicity of that line. And we were talking a little bit about this before we came down here to start filming. And the simplicity of soul music, and, you know, as somebody who can be a little bit sneering at kind of basic music, you know, certainly in punk and things like that and pop, there is something about the simplicity of soul, the way that the lyrics are, just, you know, baby, you done me wrong, baby, you hurt me so bad, that kind of thing. First of all, I do have a slightly different reaction to that. I think there's something universal about the simplicity of those lyrics that enables them to be understood by so many people. But it also strips away any of the pretense. Like we were talking about how it's very rare, and I can't really think of good examples, certainly not of like older soul songs where there's a lot of irony or like cynicism or things like that. And it feels like such a genuine art form, certainly up until the modern era at least. And the simplicity of the lyrics, the rawness of that, it means you're focusing really on the delivery. I think in a large way the lyrics of soul, whilst yes, they set the tone, and there are some significant political statements in soul songs, Nina Simone, Sam Cooke, people like that, that like the stripped back nature, the lack of florid kind of like language in it, you find yourself more focused on the sheer energy and the nuance of the performance, and it becomes about human communication. Like you don't even necessarily need to know what the words are to be moved. And that scene where Charles Bradley's singing "I love you," even if you did not understand the words "I love you," I would defy you to not be touched by the what comes out of that man in that moment. And yeah, I think you were kind of on the same page as me about that with regards to soul.
Yeah, I think soul and funk music as well has got a remarkable amount of sincerity. I think sometimes sincerity can be a bit cloying and just annoying. The Beatles are a good example of it. I bring that up because there's a bit of foreshadowing for covers later on. But also some artists we've covered who maybe like emo artists like Bright Eyes, for example. Do you know what I mean? There is a sincerity there as well, but it's a totally different kind of sincerity, you know. There's a real kind of weathered feel to Charles Bradley's music in particular, but obviously James Brown and stuff as well. And funk, I think when we were talking earlier on, I spoke a little bit about Prince, hit the Prince alarm.
Hello.
But it's, you know, the idea is like, it's kind of unabashedly like itself, you know, and it makes, you said it has no irony, it has no cynicism, it just is. And maybe sometimes that's a bit goofy. Yeah. But that's also kind of part of the charm, because not everything needs to be couched in layers of, you know, I don't know, concept or, you know, critique. You know,
this is a hot button here, so trigger warning. Obviously, soul and funk are a continuation of blues, right? A development of blues.
So is rock music.
So is most music, or a lot of music. But I would sort of suggest perhaps there is, you know, the limited means, the humble backgrounds of a lot of the earliest blues musicians, including, let's be honest, their basic education, in a lot of cases illiteracy, which is going to be relevant to today's conversation as well, that shaped the simplicity of the sentiments that they were, the arsenal of language that they had at their disposal. And that is not to say that they weren't some incredibly intelligent blues people. Please don't misconstrue me. But the overall picture of the genre was a picture of a genre that came from very humble roots, including like slavery and like abject poverty in a lot of cases. And it made sense that the lyrics were so basic and simple, because that was what the people had to work with, really. And I think the reflection that, so maybe there's like a continuity and a respect there that I don't think necessarily applies to emo and stuff like that, which is a bit more highfalutin in a lot of ways, and sometimes that simplicity is actually just a bit of an eye roll. It becomes quite cheesy or quite basic, you know, and it doesn't come across in the same way when I'm listening to this. And maybe that's patronising. I don't intend it to be, but it does. It just feels sincere, and as a result, I'm way more focused on the emotional connection that I get from this other being reaching out through the years and the cosmos and managing to elicit feelings in me the way that Charles Bradley does in this.
But there is also part of it where there's familiarity as well, right? So if we talk about genres, like just most rock genres that are played by white musicians that we've kind of spent our whole lives listening to and growing up, you become really familiar with the tropes.
Yeah.
and it just is because it's a large part of what you listen to, then you really quickly start to come up with like reasons why you like and don't like certain things. I guess we're not really schooled in funk or in soul or in R&B or even in blues.
Yeah, I do. I feel like a wee bit of a charlatan or a bit of imposter syndrome sometimes.
But also, like, I would argue that in some ways that kind of makes our reflections just, you know, probably quite sincere and simple themselves.
That's true.
You know?
I think that is fair.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we can't draw upon like the years and years of like, you know, I don't know, even going like back to like the 60s and 50s, you know what I mean, when soul and R&B were really starting to come up after the blues, you know. But I think our exposure to that is so minimal compared to all the other things that it does shape the way we approach it as well.
Tiny sidebar, you know what it reminds me a wee bit of? An inversion of those reaction videos where you see, for example, a singing coach or a blues musician listening to perhaps a performance by Tom York or a performance by Kate Bush or something like that, something that's out of their general wheelhouse, and yet managing to be so moved by it, and you watch them kind of articulating their own take on this other quite different music. But you know, it's quite nice to watch how they are still really affected by it, and they're able to kind of cut through all the bullshit and just get to like, wow, that's a really beautiful and emotional performance. It's very different to what I do, but I can still really relate to that. And I guess we're kind of doing that in the inverse as a bunch of snidey, irony embracing, you know, hipsters that listen to Meshuggah and Jesus Lizard
and whole world music.
And whole world music. We're going back to something that's quite earnest and sincere, and actually being like, wow, okay, I'm my vocabulary is maybe a bit wanton, ironically here, but yeah, this is still extremely moving. So anyway, we mentioned Daptone Records there briefly, and I'm going to talk about a guy called Tommy who's a big part of this story. Daptone Records is co-owned and was set up by a guy called Gabe Roth, who also, by the way, uses the performance name Bosco Man.
He does, yeah.
It's pretty badass. Gabe saw Charles performing and approached him, and then introduced him to the producer Tommy Brennick. I don't know, I wasn't able to get to the bottom of this, but apocryphally, Charles had knocked on Gabe's door one night and said to him, I'm the guy that you're looking for, I'm the next big talent because I'm going to be great. But anyway, whether that's true or not, Charles meets Tommy and they click really well. They go on to work together for years, well, the duration of Charles's latter career.
And before that as well, there was a period before that.
There was a period, yeah. So exactly. So he goes to Tommy's house and they record 2 tunes at that point. Charles has described how finally singing his own music, because we'll talk about what he had been doing up to that point shortly, but singing his own music instead of doing covers was a profound experience for him. So Brennick was the guitarist, he was also a producer, and it was actually him that asked Charles to do the song that brought us here today, Changes. Now, Tommy, when he's interviewed in the film Soul of America, he says that Charles, one of the things that really stood out to him was that Charles has the craziest stories from a very, very colourful and sometimes tragic life, and he really convinces him to turn those into tracks, because he's like, Charles will just riff on a subject and tell you the most amazing story, and Tommy was like, you've got all the material to be an incredible writer, you know, so let's get that down there. And which, by the way, reminds me, sometimes Charles does this thing where Tommy describes it as well, where he's telling a story and he just starts singing the story. You know what I mean? I think that's definitely certainly a very Afro-American thing in my ignorant external experience as a white man. It reminded me of the Eddie Murphy sketch where he's talking about his dad and his dad's phoning up his mum to give her a row, and he's like, Lillian! And what starts as a row becomes like he sings the row. I don't get no respect. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And I think like it reminds me of that thing where somebody starts talking and just transitions effortlessly into singing what they're talking about. So Tommy's like, it only made sense to get this guy writing and singing his own material. But 3 years after the initial recordings, which I think came out on a thing called Dunham Records, which was like an arm of Daptone at the time, there was still no real joy in Charles's career. It was still a bit stagnant. He was working doing James Brown impersonations in clubs. He called himself Black Velvet. Yeah, great name. And very good at it as well. Very astonishingly good. The Screaming Eagle of Soul sounds a lot like James Brown, I'm telling you that. He eventually one day gets a call to do a show with Sharon Jones. And Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. The Dap Kings were a band that were kind of allied to Daptone Records. And Sharon Jones had also gone from relative obscurity to success at an older age. I mean, she was at that point playing to crowds of about 1,000 people a night.
She was in her 40s or late 40s, maybe, I think.
Yeah, and so she pushed on much later in life as well. The Dap Kings, by the way, that band that was sort of allied with the label, were the band that provided the backing music to Amy Winehouse's Back to Black album.
Well, that's going to come up a little bit. So
anyway, Tom Brennick and Charles Bradley picked 10 tracks that would go on to become the album No Time for Dreaming, which came out in 2011 and is the subject of that documentary. It went on to become one of the 50 best albums of the year, according to Rolling Stone as well.
Yeah, it was also quite high in the Heatseeker charts in America as well.
I mean, the Daptone described it selling terrifically well as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's lots of critical acclaim too. I think it's hard to figure out how many they sold. The figure isn't in the film and it's not really available online, but it does seem as though they shifted a heavy amount of units.
Well, it was also reprinted as well, because I've got a reprint of it. Just to cut to the end as well, we'll fill this out, but as we mentioned, Charles passed away. So his 2016 tour, in the documentary you see him, he's departing for Europe for his first 3-week tour, I think it was. Well, his 2016 tour was cancelled when he became ill. We weren't really sure what was going on, but that I think would eventually be the illness that took his life, stomach cancer, and he died at the age of 68. A posthumous record called The Black Velvet came out on Daptone in 2018.
It's kind of a compilation, mostly like a compilation.
It's a collection of like rarities and stuff like that, by the way, he also performed a track on American Dad, the cartoon series. He's got a couple of like odd bits to sync. His intro to music, now we mentioned James Brown, the documentary starts with Charles putting on a James Brown wig, impersonating him at an anniversary show. His sister, Charles's sister, had taken him to see James Brown in 1962.
Yeah, he did.
And apparently he decided he wanted to try and imitate him, and then discovered that he actually had a voice that could... I mean, he was only 14, I think, at the time, but as he got older, he realised he could really impersonate James Brown very well. That saturated, gravelly soul scream that he's got is the fulcrum of the James Brown comparisons, and stuff like Otis Redding and things like that. Apparently Tommy was saying that when he was first working with Charles, he used to just wear the James Brown wig all the time, like out and about. And Tommy had to actually persuade him, no man, you need to start being Charles Bradley. Stop being James Brown, or stop being Black Velvet. Be Charles Bradley, like in your private life and on stage. Get rid of the wig. So he gets him to remove it. He also got him to stop wearing a cape.
That's class, yeah.
And when you see him dancing on stage in his performances, you see that he's entertaining to watch when he's moving, but he's got a lot of affectations that are kind of remnants of his James Brown days, where he's obviously studied James Brown's move. So apparently at one point Charles Bradley was working in a Chinese restaurant, and people knew he had a sort of James Brown impersonation voice, and also said that he looked a lot like James Brown. So one night apparently they went out on a work event, and he got drunk and high and got a bit wild and was sort of singing, and it turned out, the people that he worked with were like, holy shit, you really do sound like James Brown. So they persuaded him to go on stage. Apparently they had to physically push him on stage at one point because he was so nervous about it, to go and do James Brown tunes. And he realised, oh wow, I could make some money out of this.
Yeah, that was his first show, was in 1967.
Yeah.
At the age of 19.
So he did start a band at that point as well. Unfortunately, the members of the band, not him, but the members of the band got drafted to Vietnam.
Yep.
And the band just never resumed after that. To now sort of change lanes a little bit, we mentioned his sister. Talk about his family, which is the part of this story that I hadn't really reckoned with prior, because I just thought, it's an interesting story of a man getting a bit of success in his later life. As I say, the family, and specifically his mum, but also his brother, especially Joe, were such a huge part of this story that actually changed it quite a bit for me. So in the documentary, you see him, he's got a very simple background. In the documentary, he's walking about in the projects. All of the locations are very humble, which is another way to say it, really run down in many cases, not glamorous at all. In those scenes, he seems very grounded. You see him interacting with the local community. It's a very affectionate sort of depiction of him in that location. he sleeps in his elderly mum's house regularly when the quote, the projects get too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He used to leave his own place and go and stay with his mum in the basement, which is basic to say the least in his mum's basement. His mum's got Elizabeth Bradley. She, in the documentary, is getting really very old and really quite unwell, like really quite frail. He talks in that about how she'd asked him not to put her into a home, like to let her spend her last days in the house, and he agreed to that. But he does then say that she doesn't realise that as a result of doing that, he's like, I've got no life now. And she doesn't know, but I've got no private life. My life is her. It's looking after her. And he doesn't know how to have a private life. He said he's forgotten how to do that. You know, you see him taking his mum out shoe shopping, like for budget cheap shoes and the thing. And he's basically convinced that if he'd put his mum in a home, she would have died. And he feels obligated not to do that. Now, he has a sister. He has 4 brothers, although one of them passes away, which is also another big moment. The mum, it's difficult, right? The mum's passed away. You don't want to speak ill of the dead. One of Charles's brothers is interviewed in the movie. He's got a not too complimentary perspective on his own mum that Charles doesn't share. His mum left him when he was 8 months old, left the family in general when he was 8 months old, and he was raised by his maternal grandmother, who he said he thought was his mum for a long time until this other woman arrived. His mum claims in the documentary that she went to New York City to try and improve their lives, but the friends of the family and the brother seem to imply, if not outright say, that she just abandoned them because she was chasing a man that she was obsessed with who was also married. And she was out of their lives for quite some time. I think she's described as being crazy about the guy. Charles actually says that his mum basically came back on the scene and effectively stole her kids back because she was denied custody by the state. So the brother says this as well, that she kind of abducted them of sorts. And Charles's brother, I couldn't work out which brother it was. I don't know if it's Horatio or George, it maybe says in the show, but I didn't see it. He says that he thinks she only took them back to qualify for welfare because she didn't qualify for the right amount of welfare, if any welfare at that point. And he thinks that it wasn't out of a sense of duty or love. So he's clearly quite jaded with her in a way that Charles isn't. And Charles was a baby when she comes back. There's evidently, I'm not a psychologist, but there's evidently some serious abandonment issues. And the way he gives up, surrenders his own later life, his own happiness, his own relationship, from that point. And this is when I say my interpretation of what is the story here, or what is the kind of secondary headline here, is that there's something really, really sad and tragic about his relationship with his mum.
Yeah, I mean, that relationship comes a bit later in his life as well, though, because like he did leave home at 14 and was sleeping in subway cars and all that. Yeah. And when he got a job, he got his first job, it was with Job Corps and stuff like that. He worked in Maine for 10 years in a mental hospital, like as a cook.
Yeah,
he lived out in California. There's an interview I read. He realised the story of how he was out in California and he hadn't spoken to his mum for a long, long time. And
apparently, when he left to go and sleep rough, he spent 2 years sleeping on subway trains. And when he left, it was because he was worried that his mum was going to seriously hurt him.
Yeah,
when he was in the house.
Yeah, so he's in California, and he gets he's making good money as a cook. He's doing all right for himself. I know that he in the film he says that California wasn't great because he went there to try and make it as a musician. But in an interview that I read, he was like, I was doing okay for myself. I remember getting a phone call from my mum one day, and she was like, I heard you're out in California now, and he said that I'm going to buy you a new cooker on your fridge. So he did that and he bought them in California and had them shipped to New York.
Yeah.
And then his mum got the Greyhound bus to California, and that's when they reconciled, because like she went to him.
Yeah.
And I guess eventually he ended up going back to New York anyway. And
yeah.
When he got back to New York, he turned out he fell very ill because of some allergy. He had penicillin, which is crazy.
Well, no, he fell ill, got taken to hospital, and then the hospital hadn't checked his notes properly because he was allergic to penicillin, and they were giving him penicillin, and it nearly killed him.
Yeah,
he had a near-death experience there.
Yeah, he talks about the interview I read. He talks about that as well, as like seeing the light and all that, and God talking to him and stuff.
Yeah, he's quite a religious man.
He is very much so.
I think the phrase he used was, "My body had shut down. I gave up totally," and that clearly another very formative experience in the guy's life, nearly dying.
And that same interview that I read, or maybe it's a different one, I can't remember. I think no, this was a Vice interview. It's an interview. It was in 2014, and he'd moved to a new place, and his mum lived with him. He had an apartment, and she lived in like the lower part of it. And he talks about how like he was just scared to go outside.
Yeah.
So 2 years later, after the documentary, 3 years later, after 2 years after the documentary comes out, but I guess 3 years from when the album comes out, he's able to buy his own house, or his own apartment, and his mum lives with him. So he seems to have moved up in the world a little bit. He's doing well for himself, but he's afraid. He talks about the only time he ever goes outside is when he's got something to do, like go to a gig or go to practice. He's afraid to leave the house.
Agoraphobic, yeah.
Because he felt as though that it was a time of revelations, and there's a lot of corruption in the world, and that he just wants to do good with his own energy, and the only way that he thinks he can do that is by sharing his love via performing his music to people. Because the interviewer talks about how like he's clearly got a really big heart and he cares a lot for other people, and the way that he says that he can give back is just by being, just by doing music and doing the only thing he knows how to do.
So another reason that perhaps fuels his agoraphobia and his mistrust of people is what happened to his brother. So his brother really comes into his life in a bit. He's his brother, obviously, he's a big part of his life, but he really comes into his own. Joe, this is the elder brother. When he's in hospital from that near-death experience, and I think his brother came to see him, and he says he remembers his brother kissing him and saying, "Do not give up." And after the near-death experience, it was Joe who really drummed into him, "You need to pursue music. You had this second chance. You need to pursue music. Do it." And I think the phrase is, "Don't let nobody talk you out of it."
Yeah.
And that was shortly before Joe was killed. And he says that Joe was more like a father than a brother to him. Joe was killed at the age of 48 in an apartment very close to where Bradley was living with his mum, and I think it was a robbery, like a home robbery. And Bradley hears this commotion, goes to the window, sees all the police in the street, goes out. I think he pushed his way into the crime scene despite the cops trying to stop him.
Yeah.
And he says he wishes he hadn't because he saw his brother dead. And I think the other brother that's interviewed in that documentary says that Charles nearly went crazy because of it, because of how much Joe meant to him. And it does seem like it left some lasting damage. You know what you're saying there.
There's a song about it on the first record, the last song on the record, and that's specifically about his brother.
Yeah. So we kind of nodded to it as well earlier on. You should check it. In the documentary again, you find out that Charles was functionally illiterate. In his 60s, you see a woman coming to kind of teach him, and it's because basically he said he made the decision to try and learn how to read and write because he wanted to be able to write down the lyrics and the stories that were in his head, partly through Tommy's encouragement. So it's quite a nice thing when you see him doing that and kind of edging his way there. It's stunning to even think about, just getting through life without those abilities, but so many people do. And so many people do and manage to hide it as well.
Very much so, yeah.
So you mentioned his religiosity, just in terms of like his talent and his personality as well. By the way, one thing, a detail that really jumped out to me as well, his ringtone is so funny. He's got this Caribbean ringtone, which just feels like such a non sequitur in the context of the film. But he is a religious man. He's got a thing about, despite his misfortunes, he says he can't question God.
Yeah, he talks about that in a few interviews. He keeps saying that same kind of thing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
He's very caught up emotionally in his performances. You can see that they're very soul stirring for him. Eyes closed, very focused in a lot of them. Very gifted live singer. Like really, I can't overstate that. It's amazing that this guy got to that age without being more successful. You know, you find out why clearly, but he's just so talented, raw talent. Although I think the band make a comment about Tommy, maybe makes a comment about he goes off script a little bit too often. Charles is very self-aware in the sense of his own imperfections. He's incredibly self-critical, holds himself to such a high standard. You know, he's always commenting on how he's just learning and he's just improving. He doesn't have this sense of like, am I brilliant? There's none of that. Like total humility, astonishing humility. And I think even the fans, when you see them being interviewed, they seem almost frustrated at his humility. They're like, why don't you acknowledge just how good you are a bit more? And he's like, no, I'm still learning. I'm still learning. And that is a very endearing quality.
And that Vice interview that I read in 2014, he talks a little bit about how, you know, when he gets a new house, he's like, people think that now because I've got a new house and I don't really go out of the house very often that I think I'm all that and stuff. But he's like, man, I've suffered a lot in my life and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And he just is really sincere about the fact that, you know, like I've just got so much to give and I just want to do it. And the only way I know how to do it is by doing this thing. And it's a remarkable thing that he can do because his voice was truly remarkable, you know.
So much like he did with his mum, he does throughout the film and the various interviews and stuff seem to really put other people before him, other people's well-being and interest before his. He's going around his community. Some of those depictions are really, really touching. He seems almost pained by his inability to do more for people, especially his mum. There's a bit about giving up his apartment, you know, to try and benefit her as well. He clearly craves love, but he also craves companionship. That's a recurring theme in everything that I've seen about the guy, including his music. But he has effectively surrendered his own life to caring for his mum. And there's such complex emotional interplay there. You know, you are, and it's difficult to not be unkind to the woman. We don't know her, but you do find yourself really asking, why is he so devoted and so generous to a woman that seems to have treated him quite poorly? It's really quite striking. I think at one point she said that she didn't believe he would ever really make it either. Now, in one hand, you're like, oh, wow, this is great. I didn't think you'd ever make it. But on another hand, I didn't believe you'd ever make it is maybe not something that you want to hear coming out your parents' mouth. So there's a real nagging doubt that you're trying to be diplomatic and considerate, but she doesn't come across very well. And I think the depth of all of that hurt is incredibly evident in his singing. It's just so rich and so steeped in emotion, and a lot of it clearly quite negative. I mean, it did make me wonder how men of his talent might have gone off the rails in past eras of music. So you get so many figures from soul, very troubled people from very troubled backgrounds who did get success. I mean, this was the case with Sam Cooke, this was the case with Miles Davis, it was the case with a lot of people, Ike Turner, all these kind of like big figures who had very problematic aspects to their personality. Now, part of that would have been societal standards, misogyny, domestic violence, things like that were just not as frowned upon. They were just not as called out as they are now. You got to wonder about people like Charles Bradley. Not so much would he have been a domestic abuser, but how would these people have prospered with stronger hands around them, or with a bit more kind of like, but with less of a tolerant attitude to some of their excesses, especially guys like Ike Turner, people like that, people who self-destructed through drug use. Bradley sort of suggests that he didn't do a lot of drugs, he was scared of needles. You have no way of knowing how true that is. I don't really know. It's not something that's talked about a lot. But he doesn't seem like somebody that's...
No, and he seemed to be constant. He seemed to have like a regular stream of him. Like, he seemed as though he never struggled for a job either. Do you know what I mean? In all the interviews, the thing that I found quite frustrating about documentary is it doesn't really do a good job about his past.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I think there's a bit of
fragmented.
involved in that, you know.
But there are holes in his past, and from the interviews and stuff that I've read and all that, like, he did seem like he moved around quite a lot, but he was always in work. I think that's probably why he moved, because he was just trying to get jobs, you know. And obviously doing the James Brown thing as well, because he did that for years. He was in it. He was Black Velvet for a long, long, long time, you know.
But with so much damage in the guy's past, there's a lot of other ways that could have found its way out of him, and it, as far as we're aware, it didn't. It seems like his music was his real channel for that. There are other artists in the past who, their music's been a big channel, but there have been other very destructive channels for them venting some of their resentments and, you know, hurt. So he's got a lot of very endearing qualities. He's so excited in the documentary when he gets his article on page 6 of the New
Post.
York Post, man, going around telling people about that. You're like, mate, you're like the top 50 albums of the world this year, and he's like so excited because there's like this wee art. It's like when a kid gets their band in the Daily Record. You know, it's like your mum buys a copy and clips it out and stuff. It's really touching. And he's been out flyering for that for the album launch, as I said, going around talking to people. Oh, I'm doing this gig. Some people are like, no, I'm not interested. Others are like, oh, I'm already going. And he's blown away. He's like, you're already going. That's amazing. Gig is sold out, which is fantastic. He's clearly really touched by that as well. Thanks his mum from the stage at the gig as well. Still looking for approval with his mum. The audience do seem really, really moved, profoundly moved by the brilliance of the show. I think Charles realises the venue for the album launch was too small, which tells you how well he was starting to translate. People were turned away from it, and he's not happy about that. But he's taken aback by the warmth of the reception. He's also blown away by watching his own wee music video. He's like, imagine a guy like me having a music video. He can't get his head around that. So, yeah, again, the humility is just, you can't avoid it. There's so much humility expressed in this. The label says, as we mentioned, that the album performs better than they expected and anyone really expected. So, but they also want him to do as much as he can as fast as possible, because he's 62 at that point, and as we know, he doesn't live for a hell of a lot longer, and they wanted him to record as much as he could. Now, he ended up releasing 4 albums in total, one of them posthumous. No Time for Dreaming was the first one, the one in the film, covered extensively. It has a lot of love and work poured into it. Victim of Love was 2013. It's hard to know what to make of Charles's personal romantic life. That album maybe gives you a wee bit of insight in the lyrics. As we say, it seems like he sacrificed it. Let Love Stand a Chance, and that one I think was a real standout track. It has a very plaintive quality to it. It's a very classic slice of kind of soul in that sense. The track, actually, Victim of Love, is a very stripped back acoustic track. An electric version of that appeared on Black Velvet, the posthumous release. I don't know if the electric version was maybe intended for that one and they decided against it. Changes, the album, as opposed to just a single, 2016. The third track in that one, Nobody But You.
Yeah, it's a good song.
Downbeat winner on that one. Although it has that God Bless America intro, which I could have totally lived without.
Yeah, I don't know, like, that's a cover in it. So, Irvin
Berlin
song, but I think he talks in interviews like it just seemed like the right thing to do on the record. You know, have that as the start of the record.
It's a bit wacky, but there's weirder covers.
There are, like, the cover of Stay Away by Nirvana.
Stay Away.
It's actually pretty good, but it's a totally different song.
Another non sequitur. So it was actually the result of Spin magazine doing a compilation for the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, Newer Mind it was called.
Newer Mind, yeah. And so they just decided, we're going to approach a whole variety of people, and they got him to do that. It is actually really good in the verse. The chorus is like, the monotone chorus of that song is a problem with it anyway, you know, and so he was up against it with the chorus, stay away, stay away. I mean, it's one of Kurt Cobain's least interesting choruses. If it was chosen for them by Spin, I would suggest that they kind of got the short straw, because there's a lot of tracks on that. I mean, In Bloom, for example, very melodic tune, he could have done a lot with that. But he makes a valiant effort. There's also a Neil Young cover on it, Heart of Gold, which I think is, I actually thought it was okay.
It's a good song. I like the song.
It's his version of it, but I didn't get the sense that he was really connecting to the song in the same way as he does, for example, with Changes. I think on that track, on that album, Black Velvet, the posthumous one, Fly Little Girl was probably the standout song itself. But yeah, we kind of touched on this. So stylistic crossover, before we segue onto it, him on the Eagles is fascinating. So you can see clips of it online where he's asked in the context of another interview, and he talks about how the Eagles saved his life. So he says, these guys saved my life. One day I got harassed by the police and it bothered me so much. I was so angry at the world. And I just said, no, I don't want to be here no more. I want to get out of this feeling. And I ran into a pizza restaurant and I was sitting there just trying to think how to get out of this hurtful, deep down darkness feeling. Somebody came in and they put a quarter in the jukebox, and that song they put on was Take It to the Limit. And earnestly, he adds, Eagles, for that I love you eternally. Thank you. Which is just, again, just what? It's a total wild one. But it did get me musing on the crossover of like soul artists doing covers of like rock and pop, as opposed to the other way around, which we've heard lots of, you know, rock bands doing like big soul tunes. There was a few that jumped out to me. Donny Hathaway did that Jealous Guy cover,
excellent.
which is very good, that we talked about. There's a lot of Lennon McCartney Beatles stuff in this, though, when you go through the lists. Wilson Pickett's done a few. He did Born to Be Wild. He also did that, is it the Archies, Sugar Sugar?
He did Hey Jude.
He did that as well.
And it's, I would argue, the definitive version of that song. It does away with all the kind of McCartney saccharine nonsense, which he was definitely prone to. It's got vocal delivery superior, really deep soulful groove. It just transforms the song into something which is much more uplifting at the end. Like that Hey Jude, that na 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 bit is like relegated to a backing vocal. He's just basically getting at the beans on like the vocalizations of like just the screaming and stuff like that.
Improv,
and you've got a cracking guitar solo. It's just such a good version of the song. It is the definitive version of the song. It's way better than the Beatles version.
So another person that covered the Beatles was Aretha Franklin. So she did Eleanor Rigby. She also did like the Stones. She did Can't Always Get What You Want. She did a really good version of The Weight by the band.
Yeah, that's good. She also did a really good version, I think, of Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I saw she'd done it. I've never heard it.
So it came out the same year the album came out, so it must have been on like the same record, and it's like a gospel version of the song.
I can imagine it. It sounds like it could have been a gospel.
The actual hook of the song is buried quite deep into it. But no, it's a really, really good version of the song.
There's talking actually about songs that sound like that is a good example of that sound like they could almost have been done the other way, like they started as soul or gospel songs. And Burning Down the House by the Talking Heads. There's a John Legend version of this. It's a much newer cover version, but he does Burning Down the House live, and I shit you not, it sounds like that was the original version, and Talking Heads have just covered it, because it's amazing how well it translates. Other ones, the Four Tops did Light My Fire by the Doors. It's okay. It's definitely not an improvement. Amy Winehouse, pretty famous for some of her covers, including Valerie by the Zootons. There are plenty of more Beatles covers, but I think that they're of that era. I was kind of looking for people doing something a bit more modern, and there actually aren't that many good examples. And I started to kind of run out of, what is the equivalent of Charles Bradley doing Black Sabbath, which is a real genre jump. Yeah, I mean, admittedly, Tommy had to bring it to his attention. It wasn't something that he chose to do until it was suggested, and then he fell in love with it. It actually probably reminds me more of the likes of Johnny Cash doing Soundgarden and Nine Inch Nails covers than it does anything else. To have an artist from a different era jump across genres quite so radically. If you're watching the show and you know other great soul covers,
get them in the comments. Get in the comments. Drop them in the comments.
We'd love to hear that, and we'll maybe follow that up at a later date, because we are but two men researching on the internet. A
couple of covers I wanted to pick out, which I really enjoy. We Can Work It Out by Stevie Wonder is better than the Beatles one as well.
Right, aye. But again, another Beatles one.
Yeah. You didn't mention Proud Mary by Ike and Tina Turner, which is just, I really love that song anyway. I think it's a really good song.
It's brilliant.
So she's done two versions of that, right? She did one for this film in 1993 as well, when Ike was at the picture. That one's got way more energy than the original.
That's also got a lot of beans in it. Giving it the beans.
But I really like the version that she does with Ike, because it just got that really warm analog 70s feel, which kind of brings that alive, and is what makes Creedence so good as well. That 60s feel.
Fogerty's songs lend themselves really well to that as well.
Yeah, he's just there's something about
it's
stellar
It's a white man with a black man's soul.
Yeah, pretty much.
Black woman's soul.
I just want to give a couple of brief shout outs, right? This is going to be really weird, and you should check them out. And Winehouse did a version of To Know Him Is To Love Him, which is a Phil Spector song from the 1950s.
Okay.
And just a her and a single acoustic guitar. It's very beautiful.
And To Know Him was hazardous for your health.
Yeah. And Miles Davis did a version of Time After Time.
That's right, and that is a properly great version.
So it's on his album You're Under Arrest from 1985. It's totally instrumental, jazzed up version of the song. The trumpet is the vocal melody. There is no vocal in it. Apparently Cyndi Lauper thought it was like pure magic, and she was very honoured.
She loved that cover. I remember watching her talking about it. She was actually just incredibly bashful about the fact that he'd done it.
And then there's another cover on that record, right, which is Human Nature by Michael Jackson, which was written by
Quincy Jones?
No, it was written by the guys for Journey, for the guys for Toto.
Oh, right, really?
Carols, aye, they wrote that. It's a super jazz fusion. It's like yacht rock up to 1,000,000. It's insane. It sounds like hold music, but it is like, I listened to it, I was like, wow. It's something else.
I did hear a couple of, I think it was, who it was it Louis Armstrong? Was he still alive? Did he do it? I think he was still alive, and no, it wasn't him. There's a cover of a U2 song, still haven't found what I'm looking for, and it is proper hold music. It's like, it's no vocals in it. It's just like really crappy kind of like organ tones. Oh man, it's dreadful. Who was that again? Right, that's jumped out my head as well, sorry. Anyway, to just go back to the song Changes. The album's great, but the song Changes. Why did this jump out to me so much? Now, as I say, this wasn't on his radar. This was brought to him by Tommy. It's a song that's played in a waltz. It works really well the way it's delivered and translated into soul. But I think Charles really taps into the true melancholy of that song, because when you go back and listen to the original, it's not nearly as sad as his version of it, even though the subject was really sad. I was talking to Aaron Ward, been on the show before, son of Bill Ward, drummer in Black Sabbath. Aaron had said that he thought it was by Ozzy for and about Bill when he had his first divorce, when his first wife. And it turns out that was what it was about. So it's kind of Ozzy writing on in his.
I thought Butler wrote it. I thought Geezer Butler wrote the lyrics to that song, because he wrote pretty much all the Sabbath lyrics.
Well, okay. Well, in that case, those lyrics, that song is for Bill and about Bill in that sense. So the meaning is quite different. It's about a partner. When you hear Bradley doing it, it's very clear that he's singing about his mum. And I think that hadn't registered with me until I found out his backstory, saw the film, and it acquires a whole new pallor as a result of that. I think it becomes a lot more tragic and actually a lot more hurtful as a result, moving. You're talking about a very toxic, damaged relationship with a woman who really, certainly to some extent, really mistreated her sons and daughter, maybe. But and there's I think an unintended poignancy once you learn that. I think that's why it clicked with him. He leans in. I think one of the live performances, which is exceptional, in the third verse, he actually kind of ad-libs a sort of thing, and this is the bit I'm talking about. And then he does that third verse, and it really, underlines that this is about my mum. And you can tell that he's moved. He's crying at the end of it. It's a real standout for me. It's an absolutely beautiful cover version. I genuinely find it like a really physically moving experience. I can feel my stomach turning in a really, like, not in a sickness way, but the emotion is unavoidable in that. It's just maybe not for the reasons he thought. And that's what gets me now. So Sabbath had it for this reason. Bradley had it for this reason. And actually, now that I know his take in it, there's almost a pity. And that sounds terrible because this man didn't want to be pitied. But there is almost an element of pity and tragedy that merges with it now that makes it even more moving. That I've lost the best friend that I ever had bit in it. Because his mum passed away and he watched her take her last breath, and he talks about that in the...
Quite a show that night as well.
Yeah. So prior to the live performance, he says, he talks very briefly about his mum dying, about watching that, and that line, finally that line clicked, So it only grew in poignancy for him the longer he sang that song. A really astonishing bit of music. It stands out to me now because it wasn't actually as obvious why it was so touching.
I watched a version they did in Key XP, which is
that's a very good one.
And that's that was when I realised it was about his mother. I hadn't watched documentary at that point, but he talks about if you've got like a mother. I think he says that there's a monologue about if you've got a mother or a father, like you hold them and like hug them tight and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, so the song's about that, okay? Because in my head, having done all of the Black Sabbath earlier on this year, the song is not about that. It's not
you
about
just think, this is a guy covering a song about divorce and a relationship breaking up, and that's kind of cool and all. He's done a really good job of it. But there's an entire new dimension that comes into the picture once you know about this guy's relationship with his mum, and it only makes it richer as a text, but or as a work of art. But just not. I don't think in the way he maybe meant.
Yeah, it's a wonderful version of the song. It's probably the definitive version of the song. I think I'm on record as saying that Black Sabbath Volume 4 is their second best record.
I think a lot of folk would say it's their best, but it depends. Yeah.
Master of Reality is my favourite, and then it's Black Sabbath Volume 4, then it's Paranoid, in that order. But I think that, yeah, like you can't go back. It's like going back to Listen to Heart by Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, exactly.
You just can't go back. You know?
The original now sounds kind of jaunty.
It does, you know, and not like the original sounds like weirdly awkward now compared, you know. And I think that he just imbues it with he's a soul artist, but he imbues it with so much soul. There's a lot of himself in that, and I think that's what makes a great cover, is when the artist is able to imbue a part of himself in someone else's work. And that's a rarity. That's not something that a lot of artists can do well.
Well, that's why that's the difference I hear between this and, for example, the Neil Young song, which is a competent cover, but he doesn't connect with it that I can hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, it's an amazing window on a remarkable man, on a very interesting career that started late and ended too soon. But it is what it is, and I'm really glad that it brought me to him, and that I know about him, and that I can explore his extended works, and that his legacy will live on, and does live on, and does reasonably well. Was it 2 million?
Yeah, 2 million monthly listeners on Spotify at the moment.
People are out there, but I just wish more people were out there listening to him, because he was a remarkable talent. Seems like a very kind soul who had some really bad fortune but did his best regardless. And also, by the way, kudos to his band and Tommy and Gabe and the people that invested their time and effort in this man. Sure, it wasn't easy at points. He was a rough diamond, you know, but they did an amazing job, and the band are totally swinging. A great backing band. I'm sure they were gutted when they lost him as well, because they looked like they had a real, a real connection. So go out and check out Charles Bradley, a remarkable man. No longer with us, but his work is.
Yeah. So I agree. Go check it out. It's a great,
some fall feels.
The album's good as well. The album is a good record.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest,
it's his best one, I think.
I think all of his albums are good. The Changes album, I think, is my favourite. Although I think Vicky was saying that she really likes the first one.
The first one's very good. There's a real we talked about authenticity earlier on. There's a lot
Star
more
Trek
authenticity to that one. Do you know what I mean? So,
the even numbers. No, it's the other way around, isn't it?
Star Wars.
Star Trek. Yeah, no, Star Trek. Wrath of Khan. Yeah, let's not go there.
Khan. Okay. Yes. So thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, and go and watch his documentary. You'll find it online.
It's on the links below. Check it out.
All right. Cheers, folks.
See you soon.